Friday's presentation of the budget will be read by the Majority Leader in Parliament, Oseiche Mensah-Bonsu. Now, there is no doubt that the focus of the budget will be that of COVID-19 and other issues regarding payment systems and matters regarding investment. A bit of some highlights of the economic constraint of COVID-19. We shall be bringing that to you shortly. But even as we digest the import of the budget this Friday, we're also joined by Professor Godfred Bokpin, who's going to be leading a particular discussion this afternoon regarding Imani-Ghana and that of the GIZ on the need for businesses to rake in the benefits of the Continental Free Trade Agreement area. He joins us via Zoom. Professor, we're so grateful that he joined us for this discussion. First of all, we believe that this event is going to be taking place this afternoon at 2 p.m. Help us with the highlights of this particular event this afternoon.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon to our cherished viewers. It's going to be an exciting dialogue. We do know that the African Continental Free Trade has come to fruition in terms of implementation. A lot of discussions have been held over the period by various stakeholders and all of that. To a large extent, the bulk of what we have been told are more in terms of the theoretical benefits that would come as a result of the AfCFTA. But what it also means is that there's a lot of work that has to be done to translate the theoretical benefit into actual in a manner that creates jobs for the continent, because the African continent is considered a young continent. We have more youth than any other continent. That means that we need to create decent, sustainable jobs for the youth in order to contain the threat that is coming from that sector. To that extent, the question is, how much of the AfCFTA rules, operational guidelines, and all of that do Ghanaian businesses know? You can't take advantage of what you don't know, because it has procedures, it has rules, it has mechanisms, and all of that. So this collaboration with GIZ, with Imani, is to actually open it up to Ghanaian businesses in terms of understanding the fine details in order to take advantage of that. We know that our economies are predominantly SME-based, and to that extent, this is actually for them. This is a bigger market for them. We are talking about a combined population of 1.2 billion people, projected to hit 1.4 billion by 2040. That's a huge market. Population is market. So the idea is that beyond the Ghanaian market, you have this pool. How do we take advantage of? How do we navigate our way through and all of that? Beyond that, we're also talking about a market size in excess of over $3 trillion that is available to every business, every entrepreneur on the continent. How do you take advantage of that? So the mere theoretical discussions that we have seen so far, AfCFTA will help the continent and all of that. It may not happen if we don't put in place the right reforms and the discussions and the knowledge dissemination that equips our businesses to be able to take advantage, particularly for Ghana. Why am I saying so? Even though we have been selected to host the Secretariat, it has nothing to do with our ability to host the gains from the AfCFTA. There will be some physical losses at the macro level because of tariff reformation and all of that. How do we offset that? By creating the enabling environment for Ghanaian businesses to be able to take advantage of that. So this afternoon, from 3 o'clock at Alisa Hotel, in terms of those who are coming physically, and then those who are also joining online, we'll be looking at all these things. How enabling is the enabling environment for Ghanaian businesses in order to compete? Because we are not only competing with somebody in Cape Coast, somebody in Kumasi. You're actually competing with somebody from Senegal, somebody from Kenya, somebody from South Africa, even our jollof rice. There's going to be competition for it and all of that. So these are the issues.
I can imagine, but, Professor, even as we center on the Continental Free Trade Agreement area, I believe that it also sits on the expectations for this year's budget presentation on Friday. Of course, we've had so much expectation from the business community. You are an economist, and of course, looking at the numbers ever since COVID-19 hit, Ghana's revenue shortfalls has been that of a shocking move, although not much more surprising. What remains your expectation when it comes to revenue generation and even that of projections in this year's budget?
Indeed, let me start off this way, that we have to be moderate with our expectations because COVID has done a lot of havoc to our economy. We are not alone, even though in terms of the real impact, we can see differentials across the continent. But broadly, the impact is very pervasive. To that extent, in the presence of higher expenditure and new expenditure patterns have emerged. That has to be contained. In the face of collapsed revenue envelope and ballooning public debt, there's the need for government to look at the macro framework in order not to throw it overboard and create instability. To that extent, I would urge that we are a bit cautious in terms of our expectations. Of course, you could get disappointed anyway, because budget at its baseline it represents intentions. We cannot substitute that for accomplishment. Beyond the presentation of the budget, that is where work starts. How do we convert all the expectations and the projections into actual and all of that? Just look at what happened in 2020. A couple of months before 2020, let's say November, we presented the 2020 budget. We were very hopeful. The assumptions were there. We'll grow GDP by 6.8 or 6.5%. Revenue grew by this. 3 months into the implementation of the budget, COVID hit. And all the assumptions could no longer hold, and we had to revise that, and growth decelerated sharply. So these are projections.
We must be modest.
There is the need for government to anchor the expectations of the private sector in this budget and align that with the takeoff of the AfCFTA in terms of how the budget creates the enabling environment for Ghanaians to take advantage of the opportunities that are inherent in the AfCFTA. So to that extent, the signaling effect from there is particularly important for all of us. And we know that government first takes from the citizens in terms of taxes and then provides whatever they want to provide. But we also do know that given the impact of COVID-19 on the private sector, their cash flow generation and all of that, we must be very careful in burdening the faithful few. What do we do then? Government must take a hard look at the exemption regime and make sure that we rationalize the exemptions so that particularly multinationals that are in tax-paying position that are not doing so because of the way the exemption regime is structured is actually addressed. How do we block the leakages in our revenue envelope? Government must also signal a lean government as a response to the impact of COVID-19 and make sure that we reduce unnecessary budget on expenditures that we can actually eliminate, both at the executive level, judiciary, legislature, and all of that, so that we can free our fiscal space to do that which has to be done to make sure that Ghana is able to take advantage of this.
Professor Bokpem, we're so grateful that you joined us. He's a senior fellow with IMANI-Africa. But let's still stay on the 2021 budget presentation, which comes off on Friday, because an economist as well, Courage Mante, has been giving us his own version of what he expects when it comes to the growth margins that's going to be, initiated under this budget.
I will not be so quick to roll out the possibility of recording a 5% growth in 2021. And I mean, first of all, if you look at our own quarterly report, which we published in the first quarter of this year, specifically in January this year, we observed and projected that growth for 2021 could range between 3.9% to 4.9%. And so if the government is seeing their growth forecast around 5%, well, that won't be too different from the upper band of our own projection, which is 4.9%. And I would not be quick to rule out their 5% growth expectations. And there are a number of reasons why we should not be that bearish on the growth outlook, even though we need to be cautious. The first point to note is that the economy contracted in the second quarter of last year and in the third quarter of last year, at least. Now, based on these contractions, this low base has been created, and it will serve the basis for calculating the growth rate in 2021. And when the base is low, the change is higher. And so just on the basis of statistical phenomenon, a favorable base effect, we could see growth rebounding strongly in quarter 2 2021 and possibly in quarter 3 2021, and that could support the average growth for 2021. But having said that, if you also look at the sectors that contracted last year, one of the key sectors that contracted is manufacturing, recording an average contraction of over 5% during the first 3 quarters of last year. Now, that means that just as the economy continues to reopen, manufacturing activities, normalization of activity in the manufacturing sector should take place, and that should support growth. But then again, if you look at or listen to what the president said, there is the plan to start investing under the Ghana-GIZ program. Manufacturing sector is penciled as one of the sectors that they want to start investing in. So it means that if government invests in the manufacturing sector, not only would normalization of economic activity result in a recovery in growth in the manufacturing sector, but the additional investment in the sector should propel growth even stronger, and that could support overall growth for 2021. So I think that whilst I would want to be cautious, I would also not rule out a possibility of 5% or 5% plus for 2021, largely because the base effects that we expect in second quarter and third quarter could propel growth, and then additional investment from government, if it sees the light of day and if it is well targeted to the appropriate sectors and firms, could also strengthen growth in the year 2021. So I would maintain our forecast of between 3.9% at worst, 4.9% at best, but not rule out the possibility of a 5% because it's not too different from our own forecast anyway.